I'm Julie Saunders.
I'm Jan Wilson. Julie and I both have experience as school librarians, and we've worked together as district library leaders.
In each episode, we'll dive into our profession with interviews and meaningful content to inspire you. We're not experts,
but we're pretty close.
The ideas and opinions shared by any host, guest, or listener are their own and do not represent those of any respective school district.
Welcome to Library Exchange. This episode is sponsored by Mackin. For over 40 years, Mackin has provided pre-K through 12th grade libraries and classrooms with access to over 4 million printed and digital, fiction, and nonfiction titles.
The 24-time multi-award winning digital content management system Mackin Via, along with divisions Mackin Library, Mackin Classroom, Mackin Maker, Mackin Learning, and the brand new whole school resource management system Mackin Vision, help to create a truly unique and robust educational resource company that schools and educators have relied on year after year.
For more information, visit mackin.com today.
Are you ready to get started, Jan?
Julie, I am ready to get down. Get it?
Do you get it?
Yeah, we're breaking new ground today, everyone. We are going down under with this episode.
Today, we are joined by Hajnalka Malloy from South Australia. She is the president of the School Library Association of South Australia and the leader of Students Need School Libraries National Advocacy Campaign.
She's currently the teacher-librarian for a grades K-12 institution, Concordia College in Adelaide.
Welcome to Library Exchange, Hajnalka.
Good morning, or good evening in your case. Thank you.
So as we get started, tell us about the number of schools in South Australia and enrollment.
Okay, so in South Australia, there are over 780 schools, and the vast majority are public schools that are government schools. It also includes Catholic schools, independent schools, and Lutheran schools.
And what about the enrollment at Concordia?
So Concordia has 3 campuses. There are 2 primary school campuses and the secondary school campus. At the secondary school, we have somewhere between 850 and 900 students, so that's grades 7 through to 12. And in total, I think we have around 1,400 students.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you explain your role as the president of the School Library Association of South Australia?
My role is to work with an amazing team of dedicated people who work in school libraries, and we focus on providing professional development and advocacy for school libraries. There are 2 main things that we focus on, and of course, having fun.
Well, it's such an important support role. I'm sure they really appreciate your work with that. So you commissioned the Australian Council for Educational Research to complete a census in 2019 and in 2024 about school libraries. Can we talk about that?
Yes. So in 2011, there was a national inquiry, government inquiry into the state of school libraries and school library staffing in Australia. And one of the recommendations from that, one of the things that came very apparent is that people didn't know how many qualified teacher librarians there were or what the levels of qualifications there were, who was working in school libraries. There was no formal data around school library staffing in Australia. So as SLASA, we decided to commission ASA to undertake that research for us and find out as much as they could about what's happening in school libraries, who's employed, levels of qualifications, but also how the role's used, the impact it has on teaching of information literacy and encouraging that love of reading, looking at the quantity of resources that they have available, types of resources, all sorts of things.
Okay, so you said SLASA, so that's just an acronym
for the School Library Association of South Australia.
Yeah. I'm a little slow. Okay, gotcha. And I do want to talk about those results of that census, but what are the qualifications, or what do you have to have schooling for to be considered a librarian in South Australia?
To be a librarian, you need a degree in something along the lines of library and information management. So university, either undergraduate. Here in South Australia, there's a master's program that's offered. To be a teacher librarian, you need to have a teaching qualification and a librarianship qualification, both at a university level. So for many people, they start as a teacher and have their teaching qualification and then go on to do the Master of Teacher Librarianship or the Master of Librarianship. And that's how you become a teacher librarian.
So, from the census surveys that were conducted in 2019 and 2024, can you just give us a little bit more details about those results?
Sure. So, firstly, it's worth noting that every state in Australia is different. These results are just about South Australia. In 2019, we found that 23% of schools had a dual qualified teacher librarian. By 2024, that dropped to having only 15% of dual qualified teacher librarians.
Oh,
The
wow.
the vast majority of those were employed at a fraction of time well below recommended levels, so they weren't able to do their job as well as you would like with less time. We also found that only 18% of schools had somebody with some level of library qualification, so a college equivalent certificate, or in as library assistants or library technicians, and some as university level qualified librarians.
I know as a result of this, you looked at factors that came up through the research, and you've mentioned before there's just kind of a lack of knowledge of the role. So if you could talk a little bit about that and maybe advice for school librarians internationally, this seems to be common.
Yep. So I've started doing some research, and a lot of the information I've has actually come out of the US into what are the factors that are impacting on this. Obviously, ever tightening budgets are one of those, and our principals are having to make very difficult decisions about which specialist programs and which specialist teachers that you do and don't have in schools. And one of the factors that keeps coming up is that there's an assumption that the role is now obsolete. You know, you don't need books anymore. You can get everything online, so we don't need librarians anymore. It's a lack of understanding of the nature of the role, particularly around teaching those information literacy and media literacy skills. So helping our students to determine what is good information, what is misinformation, what is disinformation, and how to ethically use information. So being mindful of intellectual property laws and requirements.
I understand that these factors, these really are international factors. So when you're talking about tightening of budgets, you're assuming that the role is obsolete. I think that anybody internationally can relate to those types of assumptions that people make about the role. But you've done some things to advocate and help others advocate for their role. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Some things that you would recommend, some tips, any advice you could give to librarians worldwide on how to overcome some of these barriers?
Yeah, so one of the main tips and tricks that I've used successfully over time is getting to know your supervisor, line managers, your principal, whoever's responsible for making those decisions, and organising a meeting with them quite early and using your job and person specifications. And if you don't have a role outline or something that says, this is your role, this is what you're expected to do, to find one provided by your local or national association that outlines what's ideal, what's ideal for that you should be doing in your role, and talk to that, teach them, give them a copy of that document and address the key points in there and talk about what you're doing well, how you do it, and most importantly, focus on how this impacts on students, how it impacts on student learning, how it impacts on student wellbeing, and how it impacts on supporting teachers and reducing their workload as well. But also consider the things, the areas of growth. So what are the things that perhaps are not working well for you? What are the challenges that you're having? And how you can work with leadership to overcome them. So what professional training and development you might need, or what are the blockers to the ideal situation, and how you can work together to overcome those blockers.
In a previous conversation, you spoke about librarians sending samples of student work to their administrator or evaluator.
Yes. So one of the things that I came across in my research was the work of Deeth Ellis. And in there, it was suggested that it was had a very significant impact on school administrators and principals to send samples of students' work to say, hey, look at this work that this child has done, or look at the types of work we're doing in our teaching and learning program. I wouldn't do it all the time. I certainly don't want to be inundating them every day or every week with that sort of thing. But it helps to raise the profile and for them to see you as an instructional partner, as an educator, and focus more on the role of the teacher librarian as a teacher first and foremost, because there's often that assumption that, oh, you're just reshelving books or scanning books in and out or doing administrative type tasks, where it's not. Our role is far more focused on the teaching and learning. So having some really practical evidence of that, and especially positive celebratory evidence of that.
What are some other examples of things that would be something you would want to showcase as far as positive moments? What would be important for librarians to make sure that the community sees them doing, the teachers see them doing, that their leaders see them doing?
The absolute bare minimum is to have an annual report. And to align that annual report to the school's strategic directions, goals and aims. So use the language of the schools, whether it's a mission, a vision, a strategic plan, whatever the school has, and make it really clear that you are part of the school and rowing in the same boat in the same direction, that you are focusing on achieving the same aims and goals of the school. Certainly include all the relevant data, like your circulation data and library management data as well, but include photos, anecdotes from students or teachers about what you're doing to support the school and helping them to reach their goals.
Oh, I love that, to include anecdotes from the teachers and students, because you know what they say, you remember stories more than statistics.
Librarians often feel uncomfortable tooting their own horn, I guess you could say. So what can they do to be encouraged to share the joy that's happening in their libraries?
It's a really challenging thing to do. I'll go back to, I think still the most important one would be to have the annual report. But alongside of that, simple things like a regular spot in the newsletter that shares upcoming events. So you're not necessarily tooting your own horn, but you're sharing upcoming events, activities, maybe a little excerpt from professional reading to talk about the value and importance of encouraging students to read for pleasure, or the importance of being aware of misinformation and disinformation. So sort of providing those little tidbits of information to parents in the broader school community sort of shares your knowledge, but without specifically doing the, hey, look at me, this is what I'm doing kind of thing. Our school has regular school tours. So when we have a group of parents come around, I take a few moments to explain what my role is and how the sorts of work I do with students and how that impacts on student learning, and hand out parent brochures that explain what a good school library should have, because they're at that point where they're making a decision about what school to choose for their child. So I make sure that they consider whether or not that school has a teacher librarian and the importance of that for their child's learning. So that's more of a broader advocacy role and highlighting the importance of school libraries.
I think one of the things, too, that you'd mentioned is something I feel that often modern librarians overlook, and that's sharing professional literature, not just the things they're seeing on social media with all the bells and whistles that make the library cute and fun, but the actual stuff that brings value to your library. Do you have any comments about the importance of sharing professional literature with the people that are around you?
Absolutely. So we're very lucky here in Australia. We have some exceptional researchers, particularly Dr. Margaret Merger, Dr. Kay O'Doney, Dr. Casey Garrison, who are working very heavily in this space, and they're just a few. There are plenty of others. And of course, there's lots of amazing researchers in the US, like Dr. Keith Curry-Lance and Dee Thellis and Deb Cashel and Shannon McClintock. Miller, sorry, yes, I mentioned Shannon McClintock. I'm sorry, Shannon. And Gwyneth Jones, who produced lots of exceptional content, and Joyce Valenza, of course. Keeping up with your own professional reading, keeping on top of the information yourself, but occasionally sharing that. When you come across something that's just spot on and says it exactly as you want to, sharing that. On occasion, there was one written fairly recently by Dr. Margaret Merger on digital health literacy. I forwarded that to the PE and health department at our school, a group that we don't often connect with because we don't think of physical education as a space, but this was about misinformation and disinformation in health. So sharing that with them and saying, look, I'd really like to work with you in that space and talk about how we can get our kids to critically analyse the sort of information that they're accessing through their social media and it fit perfectly with some of the subjects that they were undertaking. So it just helps raise your professional profile, but it also helps educate and inform other teachers around the school about how you can work with them to support student learning.
I do. Sorry, Jan, if you have a question, I'm going to jump ahead. So another thing that I think you've mentioned is some type of parent brochure.
Yes.
And I love this idea because it's a great way to educate the community and the people that you serve on what they should expect from an excellent library.
Yes. So Students Need School Libraries campaign a number of years ago developed a parent brochure that we print out and hand out at special events and festivals and so forth. The School Libraries Association in South Australia adapted that, updated it and developed it. So we have our own little version that I give out at school tours and we give out locally in South Australia. It's got a checkbox on the back that's sort of a checklist for parents. And when I hand it to parents, I say, turn it over, read through that checklist and ask, does your child's school library meet all these criteria?
So what are a few items on that checklist?
Yeah. So staffed by qualified teacher librarian and other qualified staff to assist students with their learning needs, because the ideal is to have the teacher librarian and your support staff who do as much of the admin as they can so that you can actually teach. Supporting students to develop research skills that enhance learning across the curriculum. Carefully curated collection to support students with diverse backgrounds, needs and abilities. Equipped with a wide range of print and electronic resources. A place of rich collaboration between classroom teachers and teacher librarians. Running evidence-supported programs that encourage students to read for pleasure to improve literacy. Accessible for all students before, during and after school. A sanctuary for students enabling private study, independent reading and a variety of other engaging activities, visibly supported by school leadership, which my school absolutely ticks all of those boxes.
Oh, nice.
Great. We all know that we're in a support role when you're a librarian in a school, and customer service is one of those skills that is super important. What is your take on good customer service skills from the role of the librarian?
This is something I am deeply passionate about. I think it's because I grew up in a household where my dad ran his own business. So we were taught how to talk to the customers when they rang the house when I was very little, and then had the supermarket job as a high schooler. So I always think of our role very much as a customer service role. One of the things that comes up in the research over and over again is the interpersonal skills of school library staff. And many teachers and principals have been burnt by library dragons, those people that are there to protect and guard the books and keep a silent, orderly place, have forgotten that their role is actually to support and serve students and teachers. So I always think of the students very much as, and our teachers as our customers. We're there to help grow readers. We're there to help nurture that engagement with reading for pleasure. We're there to help with their teaching and learning. We're there to help them find quality sources, quality and credible sources of information, and to develop the skills to discern what is quality and credible sources. And we're there to help reduce the workload of teachers. So to help curate sources of information, support them with collaborative planning, support them with collaborative teaching and assessment of research skills.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, because if you build the trust of your teaching staff, the other things can happen. But I agree with you, like with two words, be nice.
Yes,
Be nice.
be kind. So one of the other things that's really, really hard, especially when you're the only person in a busy library, in a busy role, is to actually get out of the library and build those interpersonal connections and make sure that you're part of the broader school community. So getting out into the staff room and just sitting with people and having a chat, not necessarily about curriculum, but how was your weekend? And being a part of other school events and activities and clubs, helping out on the sports day, helping out at the school musical, being present so that you're building that relationship. It's good for your well-being to be part of that community, but it's also important for building the relationship with students and for students to see you as other than the librarian, to see you as a person and to connect with you, to smile, to have a friendly chat, to check in with them. That's perhaps the most important thing you can do is show that you're not a library dragon. And unfortunately, you may have to work doubly hard if you're in a situation where you're taking over from a person who was a library dragon, because the reputation of the profession has already been tarnished. You're going into a situation where they already have a negative perception of this is what librarians are. So you need to work doubly hard to maybe not being effusive and over the top, but certainly help change the narrative and their perception of what school library staff are.
And as always, relationships are the key.
Relationships with everybody.
Yep, absolutely. Before we close out, I just have one more question about advocacy in a broader perspective. So I believe you have some tips that you provide for librarians on how they can get involved and go beyond their library walls and their school walls to advocate for the profession. What tips do you have?
So we're all under time pressure and we all give as much as we can. So be realistic and try not to burn out. That's actually note to self, really. But sometimes it's just, if you see a really good post on whatever social media platform you're on, just sharing that, because people sharing it to the broader community, even if you go, oh, nobody on my platform is a teacher librarian or nobody's a teacher, great. Educate the general public about the importance of school libraries and teacher librarians, because they actually just don't know. They don't know, and it's not through ill intention. It's just that they're not aware of what school libraries do and what teacher librarians do. So broadening people's knowledge and understanding, that's probably the easiest level. From there on, joining your local advocacy group and helping and offering to help. That could be helping to create social media content. That could be writing letters to local politicians. It could be writing a letter for a teaching magazine or a professional journal outlining whatever, preferably positive things. Share the joy, share the positivity of the great things that happen through school libraries.
So speaking of joy and positivity, we've enjoyed talking with you today. And can you remind everyone how people can follow or contact you on social media?
Sure. I am on LinkedIn as Hajnalka Malloy, also on Facebook, and connect with the Students Need School Libraries campaign. We try to keep it fairly general. It is mostly specific to Australia, but we do repost and share information that is current and relevant internationally as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you.
So, Julie, before we start the recap, I think you need to acknowledge there was no mention of Keith Urban from me during the entire interview. We did a pre-interview and we tested her equipment. I never mentioned him.
You showed such restraint. Amazing.
I am learning to listen during this podcast experience. But anyhow, we've exchanged ideas. It's time for the recap. And I'm going to get started, Julie, because I'm a little fired up. Hajnalka speaks so calmly and confidently, but she has me fired up thinking about our profession, because I'm not sure how I feel hearing that South Australia is just like other parts of the world, including the United States, where the importance of librarians and our role is questioned. And I hate to use this word, but it's diminished so that we can just stick anyone in the library. They can do the job and they can even do it part-time.
Yeah, I agree completely. Hajnalka did a great job of summarizing the decline in the number of dual qualified teacher librarians in her region. She's working really hard to change that decline through advocating. So I appreciated all of her tips and tricks for our listeners, reminding all of us that we should be aligning our work with district, state, and national standards for libraries, and making sure that the decision makers at your school and district understand that librarians have standards to meet.
Right. So a few notes I wrote down from her were: start by joining your state's library association and even go bigger with national organizations. Besides networking, these organizations advocate for our profession and there are people who speak up on our behalf. And then submit an article pitch to School Library Journal or another professional journal. Share about your program, because when people hear the word school librarian, they think about books And we really want them to think about information literacy, media literacy. Like, I can't wait for the day when someone says, oh, you're the person who's teaching students to be successful consumers of information. Yes.
Well, I think also making sure that you're focusing locally as well. So in addition to educating our leaders, it's helpful to showcase student work and student impact and showing evidence of that instructional role to staff members and leaders in your school. It's crucial to change the perception of the traditional library role. So one thing I realized from the tips that Hajnalka shared was being consistent and regularly sharing library program success. The consistent sharing of success really can change those perceptions of the importance of libraries in our community.
Yes, I know that many librarians don't like to toot their own horn, but we have to. And whenever I had a new evaluator or a principal, I would go to them and say, how do you like for me to communicate with you? You know, some of them wanted a text message for me to text them when something was happening in the library, and one wanted me to send like a week in advance. We all have to kind of grow in this area because marketing doesn't always come natural. But if we always go back to what she also mentioned is speak to the fact that you're impacting student learning.
Absolutely. I wanted to highlight also her commitment to advocacy with her parents using the parent brochure with students and staff members through other school activities that she would be involved in. And in the larger community, as you mentioned, with involvement in the library organizations at the state, national level. All are actual examples of the importance of building relationships. Really, all of it's about building relationships so that you can communicate appropriately about what's happening in your library.
She used the statement to do things to raise your profile. And one thing that I would also like to mention is admitting to your administrator, hey, I would like to grow more in this area. Or admitting integrating AI into my lessons is a challenge. So I have a plan for attending this conference, or I would like to go shadow this librarian. Show that you're investing in those skills. And like she said, that raises your profile with your administrator. So, Julie, I read some of the articles she mentioned by Margaret Murga. It's called TikTok and Digital Health Literacy. And it specifically just looked at how well can a person locate and evaluate health information on TikTok. So it just did TikTok users, but it made me think of the bigger question of how well do all of us function in an online environment? If you're listening to this, you're functioning pretty well because you've located our podcast. Follow Hajnalka, you guys, on LinkedIn and Facebook. Check out the cover art of our podcast for the correct spelling of her name. And check out the website, Students Need School Libraries. There's merchandise and resources, and we look forward to you joining us next time.
Make sure to visit our website at www.libraryexchangepodcast.com.
You'll find episode notes and links. You can even submit your questions or inspiring stories that may be featured on the podcast.
If you're looking for some swag for your library or book-loving friends, visit libraryexchange.etsy.com.
That's a lot of URLs, so I'm glad you had to say all of that, Julie.
Thanks for joining us. We can't wait to have you back for our next episode of Library Exchange.